Hello everyone, we're about to get started, so jump on in and take a seat. Thanks to everyone here today for joining us at Music Market. I've met a few of you before, met a few of you who are watching online as well, but for those who don't know me, my name's Katie Stewart. I'm the General Manager at the Victorian Music Development Office. Before we begin today's session, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we're on today, the Wurundjeri people of the East Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, as well as to all First Peoples of this land, and of course to all First Peoples joining us here today, both in person and online. So welcome again. This is the May edition of VMDO Links. As I've mentioned a couple times, this is a hybrid event, so we've got you all joining us today, but we've also got an audience joining us online, so hello to you all. We've got Mel Pose from the VMDO team in the live chat with our audience today, and we really encourage you to get involved in the conversation. So if you have any questions that come to mind, feel free to pop them in. And we'll get to your questions. We'll get to the online audience questions first at the end of the chat today. So, and for everyone else in the room, feel free to help yourself to the snacks we've got on offer and the bar. It's run by Hannah from our team as well. And looking forward to having a chat with you at the end of the session. So for now, I'd like to hand it over to our speaker today. That's Tristonne Forbes from AIM iHub. So for the first half of today's session, Tristan's going to be taking us through an entrepreneur masterclass, and she'll then be co-hosting an in conversation with Matt Allen, who's the co-founder of Tractor Ventures and Side Stage Ventures. So handing over to Tristan.
Hi everyone, welcome. Great to see so many people here, and hi to everyone that's online. So my name's Tristan and I'm from the Australian Institute of Music's iHub. I'm not sure whether you've heard that the Australian Institute of Music is embracing the startup sector and starting to work with startups, but it's been going for about a year now. And we have 8 companies in our incubator at the moment, so we can talk a bit about those a bit later. So it'd be great to get a feel for the people that are here in person. Who has a company at the moment? Does anyone have a company? A few of you. Who's got an awesome idea and wants to know whether they should make it into a company? Yes? Excellent. I'm sure we've got a mix. Who's got a company they wish was a bit bigger or growing a bit faster? Like, hey, yeah, don't we all? All right. Well, what we're going to do today is we're going to start with some basics. We're really keen to work with people in the music industry and help them build great companies. My background, I'm a business strategist. I'm also a big, massive business nerd. I have been fascinated by how to grow companies since I was in high school. And I worked with big companies for a while, but it's much more fun in the startup sector where like amazing things happen. So I've been in the startup sector since about 2015. So I've worked with around 100 companies, and I'm sure when you get to meet Matt in a little while, he's worked with just as many. And so we're really excited to be helping sort of grow this momentum for building amazing companies in the music industry. I've had a look at it. I'm only new to the industry, but there's a massive opportunity in this space. So we're going to start with some basics today. I'm going to run you through how you can turn your idea into a business in 20 minutes. So you can time me, see how we go. All right, first thing we need to do is we need to think big. It's actually easier to sell a big idea and get people motivated around a big idea than it is a small one. So we need to sort of think about, what do we want the world to be like? What can we create? What problem can we solve? And I've just come up with one that I know is really at the hearts of a lot of musicians, and that is, well, we want to be able to collaborate with each other. And we don't want to be restricted in the way we can do that. We want to be able to collaborate anywhere, anytime. So if we take this idea and make it really big, what could that mean? How could we do it? Well, I work with a lot of ambitious, wild thinking entrepreneurs, and my head went straight to holograms. Let's get some AR holograms out there. Let's get you collaborating with whoever you want, wherever they are in the world, and doing it in the way that you would if they were in the same room as you. That sounds pretty cool, right? Does this sound like something you'd want to build a business around? Okay, how many minutes have we got left? Right, okay, we've got to start really small. If we just went straight to that idea and spent a whole lot of money and a whole lot of time and a whole lot of energy and not really know whether or not people cared and were going to interact with that, then we'd have wasted a whole lot of our lives. So we're going to start really small and we're going to test really small. We're going to think about this company as an experiment. Nobody can tell you whether a business idea will work. Only the market can tell you. And so what we have to do is go out into the market and start talking to people and start figuring out whether or not there is a need for our product. So we have to think of it as an experiment. So if we go out into the market and we find that really no one's interested in our idea, that's fine. It's not that we've failed, it's just that it's not the right time, it's not the right product, it's not the right idea, because this is an experiment. All right, so when you think about collaborating with other musicians, what are the big problems we're trying to solve here? Why is it so hard? Well, it's hard to find other people to collaborate with. It's hard to get everyone together in one place, especially during a lockdown. And it's hard to find the right environment with everything you need tech-wise. So these are the three big things, right? Well, if we were going to come up with a solution for those, what would our product be? Our product would probably need some kind of community aspect to it, because if you're going to find other people, if everyone's in a community, it's easy to find. Then we need to get everyone together. Well, look, the easiest way to do that is online. Let's try that. And then you have to have the right environment. Well, you know, it's not like we're going to build an AR solution tomorrow, but eventually, let's see if we can get some holograms happening. So, how many minutes we got left now? We've got to get talking. We've got to get actually listening. The next thing we need to do is go out and talk to a whole lot of people. And it's at this point that a lot of our entrepreneurs go out and pitch their idea. But it's not quite the right way of going about it. And I'm just going to illustrate that in a couple of ways. Because if you go out and pitch, you're guessing whether or not somebody's into what you're selling, right? So, for example, if you look around the room at anyone who isn't wearing sneakers, and you had to guess what they would like, brand, colour, size, fit, what are the chances of you getting that right if you're guessing? Pretty low, right? So if we go and pitch, what are the chances of getting that right? All right, so let's think about somebody that we know really well. Think about the last time you went to buy them a gift and how hard it was. Even though you know this person really well, how hard it was to figure out what to buy them. So when you guess, it's really hard to get it right. So we've got to talk to as many people as we can. Lots of people. The more people you talk to, the closer you'll get to figuring out what your product should be. All right, so let's just say we did all that and we spoke to about 50 people, and this is what we found out about our original idea. We found out that really this whole idea of building a community so that people can find other people to collaborate with, there's guys out there already doing that. Vampr is doing an awesome job. The next thing we thought we'd need in our solution was, you know, sort of a way for everyone to get together. And that's, everyone's doing that already online. Everyone's got their way that they like to do that. So that's perhaps not part of the solution. But where everyone was really struggling was, well, how do we find the right environment? So let's maybe focus just on that. The other thing we found when we talked to people is that there's this core group. They're really similar in some ways. We were able to figure out how they're similar, and they want this product right now. They need it desperately. So if we can figure out how to build something, they're the first people that are going to buy it. And that's a really important thing to find out, because what you're doing in your company is you are finding the fastest path to revenue. If you're like a lot of entrepreneurs that Matt and I know, they believe so passionately in their idea that they've ditched their day job, they're eating 2-minute noodles, living with their parents, perhaps not the 2-minute noodles, they have a limited amount of money, they have a limited amount of time, and they have a limited amount of energy that they can throw into an idea. So the faster you can find those customers and the faster you can get to revenue, the more likely you are that your company will survive and grow. All right, now while all of this talking and listening is going on, you also need to assemble a team. Chances are you've got a higher chance of success if you've got co-founders. It's great to be working with a bunch of people that have all bringing different ideas, different diversities, different ages to the team. So in this case, who would we look for? Well, if you're the musician, that's great. You've got that piece covered. You'll know your market. Tech expert. We need someone to help us build out this product and ultimately to our dream product, maybe. Someone that can get us to that big place of holograms. We also need someone that's going to be able to do the sort of nuts and bolts of, reaching out to people and drawing to them to our company. That kind of, the person that helps build the infrastructure of the company. So these are the three people. So if we had somebody that had done that before, that would be really cool. That would be great. But otherwise, we have to, find somebody that's got the skills that can learn as they go. The other thing we need to do when we find these co-founders is we have to make sure that everybody is motivated to succeed together. And so that means even though it's your idea, you need to share this company with them. And you need to make sure everyone has got a massive chunk of it. There's none of this, you keep 90, everyone else gets 10. That doesn't work. Because effectively that means that if the company becomes profitable, they're working for you. So everyone has to have a massive chunk of the company. And the way that we can help manage this, because it can be tough sometimes, and people might need to sort of, they might have family obligations, or they might get offered a dream job and they may decide to go their own way. So rather than everyone getting their shares on day one, their shares vest over time. So the longer they stay, the more of that share that they're entitled to, they keep. So it's a really clever way that the startup sector's worked out that can keep companies going even through this initial stage where people are trying to figure out whether it's right for them. All right, so now we're building a team. We're still listening to everyone. Now we're at a point where we can start testing something in the market. We start moving into, well, let's try and pitch now. We know our customer a bit better. So we're building a minimum viable product. Everyone's heard this term. Yes, MVP. So what are we doing? Well, we're testing a value proposition. And the value proposition we need to test is the right place to collaborate. We've got to create this environment. So we're testing that as our value proposition. And there's a couple of ways we can do this. We can do it in a really simple way, which is just to create a website, put it out on our socials, get some messaging out there and see how many people we can get to click on it. We may have listened really hard, but we may not have heard the right things. Yeah. So if we can get people to click on something, we know, okay, this is what they're after. This is what they're looking for. And then you may want to create some kind of environment, and that little diagram there is sort of saying you may just need to sort of do it manually in a really clunky, long-form way that takes hours, that you could never build a company around, and ultimately, because it's just too confusing and too difficult to do. You may need to do that initially. And when you've proven that you've got lots of people that love your product, then you can start building awesome apps, and then you can start building great processes and digitize everything and scale everything. But the thing you've got to get right first is, what is that product that they will love? So you may start with what we've got now, trying to collaborate online and play music online it's just a disaster. Maybe the first step towards this vision of the right environment is a recorded solution where you can play with others, but everyone records their bit. And then maybe, the tech, web Wi-Fi's lagging issues kind of sorted a bit better, or you can figure out a way of overcoming it, and then maybe you can get people in a collaborative space. And then ultimately, it might take a couple of years, it might take 5 years to get to this big vision of this amazing hologram experience. But that's okay. But all the way along, you see, you're testing this appetite to collaborate with anyone, anywhere. All of these ideas are all based around that fundamental concept. Right. Now, the other thing that you need to be really good at as an entrepreneur is measuring traction. You've got to measure how many clicks, how many repeat customers, how often they use your platform. You have to just measure absolutely everything you can, because you're always going to be asking yourself when you get out of bed in the morning, should I keep doing this? Is it working? You shouldn't have to run on gut feel. You should always be figuring out ways of testing in the market whether or not it's working. So this is a really important one. So there's a lot going on as an entrepreneur, and sometimes it can feel a bit like this. Would you agree with that, Matt? All right, so I don't know how to get to the next slide. Oh, we're not playing it again. All right, so the thing to note about this is it can get pretty tough at times, and you don't know one end from the other, but there is an amazing community of people out there in the startup sector. They are the most stunning group of people you would ever want to meet, and they mentor companies all the time. They spend time for no money. There's communities where you can go and talk to other entrepreneurs and learn from what they've done. There's a whole bunch of accelerator and incubator programs like the iHub one. There's amazing amounts of information online. So this is a really open community to help you grow your companies. And keep your eye open, because later in the year you may see something from VMDO and iHub. We're going to collaborate in a little project to actually provide some of that support to music startups. So keep your ears open. We'd love to hear from you at that point. All right, that's it from me. We're going to get some stalls here now, and we're going to get Matt up, and we're going to take some questions and have a further chat about music and startups.
Hello.
Testing. Okay. Why don't we start with you introducing yourself, Matt?
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Allen. Most people call me Matter because there's too many Matts, and my email address was Matt A, and that's why I call it that. I spent the first half of my career as a software developer, building websites and stuff for other people. Started in the music industry, built Grinspoon's website for them when they were, just unearthed, and spent a bunch of time with music and festivals building their stuff when, they didn't know how. I got paid with a digital camera. It was like the most amazing thing on earth. Had an 8 meg card in it, and I'd go to the gig, I'd take some photos, go home and upload to the website. It was the most magical thing on earth. So first half, being a dev, being a software developer, being a technical co-founder, being in charge of all the technology, that was me. And then sort of decided I didn't want to be a dev anymore. Turned into a technical recruiter, so I built the software engineering teams for some of the big companies that you use, like realestate.com.au and people like that, who had hundreds and hundreds of software developers. And then I joined AWS and worked on the startup team and a venture capital team, which is an exciting global role. I got to hang out with founders and VCs all day long. And in parallel with that, my wife, April, and I have been investing in early stage tech companies since about 2013. So we have about 50 of those, which has been exciting to help that many the founders start their ideas. At the end of 2019, I was lucky enough for a couple of those investments to actually returned me some money, which is exciting. And I was lucky enough to not have to earn Bezos bucks at AWS anymore, and took some time out. And I've been part of the venture capital community. I've been working with a few of the VCs to help them allocate some of their money. But I also realised that venture capital as an investment vehicle has a very, very high expectations on the type of returns they want when they give you their money. And it turns out that about 1% of tech founders probably are building a company that can actually give that to them. So there's 99% out there who really struggle to get capital into their business because that capital has this extremely high expectations on their returns, and not everybody's building the next Canva. They're just not, right? And I'm like, well, those other 99% need some capital. What if I built a company that was able to help them out? So you may have heard the term in startup land. They talk about unicorns. Unicorns are companies that are worth $1 billion. It was coined nearly a decade ago, and I decided that we shouldn't call them unicorns because it all makes it sound like dickheads and children. So I decided that like the VC-backed companies, they're the rockets. So rockets, because they're exciting, but they're expensive and they're hard to land and they're prone to blowing up. So it sounds a bit like a VC company to me. And I built Tractor Ventures, so we're there for the rest. So they're consistent, reliable, and they're a bit easier to build. But if you tell a farmer you're going to take their tractor off them, they're going to be a bit pissed. So Tractor Ventures was born. We do revenue-based financing. So the downside of what we do is that you need to get your revenue to $15,000 absolute minimum a month. So it's not for like right at that beginning stuff Tristan was talking about a minute ago. But we are there. But the nicest thing about it is that we don't expect you to necessarily turn this thing into a rocket. You can if you want. It's your choice. But we don't make you do it. And when you're starting off building a company, you can't tell whether it's going to be a Canva or not, and we sort of don't force you down that path. The other thing we do, so that's where most of my time goes. We have literally tens of millions of dollars which we are able to lend out to founders who then pay us back via their sort of sharing some of their revenue with us for a couple of years. And then just recently I started it is a rocket factory. It's called Side Stage Ventures. It's our equity play. So if you are building a rocket, then we have the money over there for you, and it allows me to do very tractory things over here and very rockety things over there. And that was with a couple of my mates, the founders of Linktree, who you may have heard of, recently valued at about $1.3 billion. A mate of mine called Jaddan, who runs Unified Music. He manages Vance Joy and Illy and a bunch of other cool Aussie artists. And a couple of other friends, another mate whose company got acquired by Apple. He works for Apple Music. He's about to leave Apple Music, run our fund. But so that's pretty exciting. So that's where we do our equity investing, and we actually take ownership stakes in tech startups. That's probably it.
That's like a tour of the startups ecosystem as well, isn't it? Yes. A little bit. All right, so I thought we'd start with just chatting about what it takes to be a great founder. So some of the personality characteristics that you've seen and which ones are the most important.
Yeah, I really like founders that you need to be extremely ambitious, because there's a lot of times when like the results you get aren't super positive. People are not as excited about your shit as you are. It's as simple as that, right? And so you need to be positive, but I think you need a bit of an air of realism as well, in the fact that this is unlikely to just take off like a rocket really, really quickly. So a lot of the time, and you sort of mentioned it about being attached to your idea, I think the best thing you can possibly do is really resonate with the problem and really attach to the problem, because the solutions change all the time. And if people keep telling you, say, I've got that problem, and then you go, I've got this thing, and they're like, that doesn't mean the problem doesn't exist. It just means you haven't found that right thing. So I think, being able to, you've already touched on it, listen, make sure that you're not, that your ego isn't attached to stuff. So, we're in the music industry. It's all built with people with huge egos. That's the whole point, right? And there is a certain point in time where when things are working well, you kind of got to dial your ego back up a bit. But right at the beginning, you've actually got to dial it right down, so that when someone says that's a shit baby, you're like, yeah, it is, and you move on and go get a new one.
The other characteristic that I think the music industry's got in spades is that you need to be really creative, because you're building something that hasn't existed before, and you're coming up against all these problems and issues, and you need to be able to just quickly think outside the box and find ways of solving them. I think that's another really, and you were saying before how the music industry is really similar to the startup sector in a way.
Yeah, I mean, as a founder who's got this idea, it's not dissimilar to an artist sitting in their bedroom going, I need to create my first track, and I need to get it out there. And the actors are almost exactly the same. An angel investor is a bit like an A&R person who's sort of out there looking around and sort of takes that first punt on you and puts you in front of, labels are like VCs. And there's a bunch of parallels here. The funding mechanisms change a little bit at scale, but it does feel to me like you're trying to find your groove and find your person, your people who are going to support you, which is, it must feel very similar, I imagine.
So I love the analogy of making tracks in your bedroom, because you have to do everything when you first start a company. You've got to do everything from figuring out the legal structure and doing the bookkeeping, right through to all the socials, to organising all the information you're collecting from customers. You've got to just be a complete jack of all trades. So that's another characteristic.
Yeah, but it's much easier to start startups now than it was when I started in the late 90s, because I'm old. Because there's a lot of tools that allow you to do all this stuff and sort of do the heavy lifting for you, right? So it's not like you have to build all those things to help you support you as well. And a lot of stuff gets done in a really lo-fi manner. So, to give you a really good example is, at Tractor Ventures, we are managing tens of millions of dollars. There's a lot of spreadsheets, right? Like, you don't need all this really expensive equipment to get going. And even when you were talking about, building websites and stuff, like, a lot of people freak out and like, I need a tech person. Unless you're building AR, which, that's quite technical. Most of the stuff we do is kind of forms and buttons, right? Like, collect some information from someone, do something to it, give it to someone else, charge them for it. Like, it's kind of how we, if you dumb it down a little bit. And there's a lot of these no-code tools where you really don't need to be a nerd to get going, which is exciting.
That's a great point. There is a whole community, and there's so much on the internet about no-code products, and it is amazing what you can do. You can look as big and you can look as shiny as a big company with all the bells and whistles, but there's a whole series of no-code tools of other people's that you've combined and connected to make something work. It's amazing.
Yeah, and a lot of it, like that, the perception reality stuff is, you can also do that as as an artist as well. Like, people think you're bigger than you are, and I would there's almost like you want to live at both extremes. Either like it looks really janky, you're obviously new, or you can put a bit of time and effort to make it look slick. And people make assumptions, and as a founder, a lot of the time you just got to create leverage out of those assumptions and just roll with it, and see whether or not they sort of keep leaning into the thing you're doing.
Okay, great. So there's some tips on character and tenacity and grit there for you. I thought maybe we could share a story of a startup journey that we've seen, and so sort of like just to sort of step you through. So I'll kick it off. Yep. There's a company that I started working with in the ag tech space, because I've done quite a bit of work with that industry. And when I met them, they had all this really smart technology about how to grow plants under lights, and they wanted to get into vertical farming. Do you know what that is? It's like, rather than have a field full of plants, you grow them vertically under lights, and you can grow them in the city or anywhere in small spaces. So they had all this great technology, and they were talking to customers, and they had people in the team from other countries, and they're having what they thought were all these really positive conversations, but nothing was really landing. And then they started working with us, and we had a look at everything they were doing, and we said, okay, but how can you actually focus more in on the problem that you can solve and find this first customer that really needs you? So they went away and did a whole lot more listening, and they found that there were these big warehouses in Sydney that were supplying restaurants, massive operations, and in summer, a crop of bok choy grew in 3 weeks, but in winter it took 6 weeks. But the demand for bok choy was the same all year round. And so what they realised is if they could take their technology and make it a plug and play, fit into a pallet size, in a warehouse, that would be an awesome solution for these warehouses, because they could just, set it up, close the door, 3 weeks later, open the door, there's your bok choy. On the back of the image that they put together, they had the tech, they knew the tech would work, but they had an image they mocked up. They went to talk to some customers, they got $2 million worth of forward sales. And it was at that point that they could then go to the product design process, which is really expensive, and start having these units actually built. So they've kept going and going and going, and now I heard the other day that they have just announced that Woolworths are putting vertical gardens in every store. So how amazing is that for a story?
That's cool. Bok choy as a service. That's great.
They do a lot more than just bok choy now.
That's amazing. But I think the interesting part about there is some advice I would give you all is like narrow down the surface area of the problem you're trying to solve till it's uncomfortably small, right? So you can speak to people who have that specific problem, and then you can make it big. The bigger your problem, the more people you have to talk to, and the less likely you'll get that little bit of signal to tell you that it's working. But if you shrink it down really small, you can speak to very specifically to a very specific group of people. And if you're doing things like running an experiment, buying some Google ads or buying some Facebook ads, the smaller it is, the cheaper it is. The more generic it is, the harder it is to actually get enough people. So.
And you get better data too, because you're not testing 5 things at once.
Yeah, exactly right. So there's a company, there's a startup called Muso. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Muso. Jeremiah, Brandon, and Alan. So when I was working at AWS, they came and saw me, and we sat in the kitchen of the Amazon offices in the city. And there were these 3 kids, let's admit it, who had started building this technology solution and run out of money. And my job on the startup team at Amazon was to speak to founders all day. So I'm like, righto, here's your 15-minute slot. I'll see you in the kitchen. And we ended up speaking for an hour, and I gave them some tasks to go do. I basically said, look, I think you're onto something here. I think you've run out of money. That sucks to be you. But if you went and if you could prove to me that there's people who actually want this, if this is a real problem, like I think I can believe it's a problem, but I'm not the customer. So, and as an investor, there's this inverse thing where the less I know about something, the more exciting it is. Like, that sounds amazing. And then you start to learn about it, this is shit. And then, so you got to be careful of that when you're speaking to people who might want to invest in your company. They get excited because they don't know anything about it. Then you tell them and they're like, oh, actually, I'm less excited now. Anyway, so I was that guy. I'm like, it sounds exciting, but I don't know anything about this, so go. And I do this to all founders. I send them on their merry way and then forget about them because nothing generally happens. But Jeremiah pinged me about 3 weeks later and said, Matt, have you got some time? I'd like to show you something. And I'm like, yeah, fine, come back to the kitchen. So they came back to the kitchen and they flopped down this manila folder I think I went and said, if you can go and get 20 venues to tell me that the problem exists and I don't know how to solve it, then that's interesting to you and probably therefore interesting to me. And they came back with 100. And 20 of them were from Auckland. I'm like, what do you do? He said, I went on a thing with my girlfriend and I just left her alone for a day and went and knocked on all these pub doors and got them to sign these letters of intent. And here they are. And that was impressive. So the bar for delivering some sort of early result is quite low, I think, in founders. A lot of people just go, oh, it's too hard, I won't do that. So it doesn't take a lot for all of a sudden for me to go, holy shit, you came back with things. With proof, like experiments. They went and spoke to people and listened. I did put together that first investment into that company, and then they joined StartMate, and now they've raised money, and they've survived through COVID, where their revenue was going up at 25-30% a month, which is eye-watering, and then it went to 0 overnight, and then they've managed to survive, and now it's going up and to the right again really quickly. And that's a lot of that grit and resilience, and everybody, all the investors, all my friends that we invested in was like, COVID, great, there goes our money, bye. And they managed to get through it. They managed to raise some more money and they managed to hire a team and double down on some of the products that were working. They're now in multiple countries. They're all over the place. COVID is allowing them to really double down. And interestingly, what happened during that time where you think, live music is dead, What actually happened was all the venue groups, all the venue owners was like, when this thing comes back, we know it will, we can't afford to not be efficient. So we need to put in some processes and software and so forth to allow our venues to do more with less. So it's almost like this horrible event created this environment for these guys to go out to the venue groups. So they were knocking on every pub's door, and they went to AVC and went, how about you guys roll it across your hundreds of thousands of venues, and because you also get to get some efficiency.
That's another character trait, actually. Just like saying, oh, why don't we try that? Like, oh, there might be an opening there now. Let's go talk to them now. They may have tried 3 times, but something's changed in the environment and they go back and, you get a better reception. Yeah. All right, I've got one that's related to being inside the startup sector, and this is actually an example from the iHub. There was a DJ from Ibiza that knew about the impact that music has on mood, and not just from his awesome DJing days, but from his grandma that had dementia. And he decided that this is a product that needed to be in the market, an actual mood-based mental health product. And he came into the iHub and met some of our mentor network, because we've created a community of sort of like experienced entrepreneurs and venture building experts. There's industry experts and some of the industry gatekeepers, as well as sort of like funders and investors. And so we were able to introduce this remarkable entrepreneur who brought a bag of evidence along to people inside the music industry, and he was able to sign a license deal for the entire back catalogue of the Universal catalogue. And so you can just see how massive that is and what that then enables him to achieve with his company and with their growth. And they're doing great. They're taking a product into the aged care sector. And it's a it's a really easy platform to use. Thumbs up, thumbs down. It finds songs that
remind old people of their youth.
Yeah.
And they calm down. They're less angry at the people looking after them. It's pretty cool. It's called Music Health.
Yeah, it's called Music Health, but the actual app's called Vera.
I've got another one. Music related. Not as warm and fuzzy as that one, but is really interesting when we think about the crossover between music and commerciality. So I chair a company called Qsic, and at Qsic we stream the music into McDonald's and 7-Eleven, Mecca, Guzman and Gomez. Think about a lot of the brands that want to control the environment, the audio environment, from a central location. That's us. We all stream it via Sonos. We're the biggest buyer of Sonos in the world. And we have this AI platform, Demand Sensing, which when you use it out the front of 7-Eleven, we can help them understand what their customers are doing and influence their buying behaviour. But what's more interesting at the back of house is when drive-through gets really long, we can up the BPM and people flip burgers faster and they put more through drive-through, and we knock 12 seconds per car off at the height of drive-through, which literally translates to tens of thousands of dollars of extra
That's hilarious.
Per store, per month. It's insane. And they're literally like, last year we knocked 2 seconds off, and this year we're going to do 12. So it's one of those things where I think the application of music and in environment, in the built environment and in a commercial and helping people, whether they be old people, whether they be these commercial folks is really interesting. And I think audio in itself is an under thought through medium for stuff like that.
Yeah, there's lots happening in the music industry. So if you have identified a problem, or that something should be changed for the better, then maybe it's a good opportunity to go out there and test it. Is this a good time for questions? Have we got some questions? No questions from online.
No questions. Anyone got any? There's one. Do you want to?
There's a mic behind you.
Here we go. Katie has a thing.
Thanks, Katie. If you have a potential idea that requires, because we live in a digital age now, the technical side of knowledge and things, where's the best avenue or access in finding or going to get around the contacts that can help you, whether they're freelancers or companies like that?
The tech founder question.
Yeah,
It's a big question. Lots of people have it.
It's a big one. It's a tough one. And you know, my recommendation is quite often, like, it's pretty daunting to not to like, you're sitting there going, I'm non-technical, right? I'm not a coder. I don't know how to write code. It's scary. And it is. However, those no-code things, and even like for your own benefit, let me rewind a little bit. As founders, we're salespeople, right? We've got to sell, right? So you want to get so confident that the thing you want to do is real, that when you rock up to someone and you stumble across a tech guy somehow, right, because you've gone to, I don't know, the meetup in Melbourne where the developers all talk about their programming language, which happens all the time, every month, right? You literally, you know, and they'll have a thing where you get up and it's usually for people that are hiring. You say, hey, listen, I've got this thing I'm building. I'd love some help. And, you know, people will quite often do that. But you've got to get to the point where you're confident enough to sell, you know, to sell your thing to those people. So you rock up at the you know, the Ruby on Rails meetup or the PHP or the JavaScript or whatever it is, and a room full of nerds, you know, and you get up and you're confident enough to stand up and say, hi, I'm building this, I'm building this, this is the problem I'm solving, I've got all this evidence that suggests it's a thing, and, you know, I'd love someone to help me build this thing. Right? So you know, what I'm saying to you is that to rock up and do that, you got to have a lot of confidence to stand up in front of a room full of devs, right? They're all like super nerds going, who is this person? So step one is do what Tristan said, is to make sure you've got a thing, because the challenge you have as non-techie is that you don't know how easy or hard stuff that is, and you'll probably assume the wrong direction. So, it's really easy, it's really hard, or I can't do that, and it's actually quite easy. So you really kind of want to narrow that down and be able to really be comfortable explaining what you're trying to do to people before you find those people. So that was not a great answer, I'm sorry, specifically.
That's all right. And if there's, like, we have a website set up, but there's some issues already with it, some things aren't showing up or they've disappeared, and it's hard to find where to recover it.
What's your website on?
It's just through our company at the moment, but that I work for, Remote Control Records. But we've lost a page of just office playlist picks. I think we have someone looking at it, but, you know, just branching out towards people that might even understand the basics of that. Even
so, you know, if you know what technology the thing's built in, then you can go on Fiverr or on Upwork or any of these platforms where you describe the problem. Hey, we've got a website, it's built in JavaScript or it's built in whatever, and like the things have gone away. Can you help me? Like it's sort of being able to describe what the problem you're trying to solve is, so you can get some help. Yeah, you know, Upwork is full of people. Yeah, it's pretty random. Like there's some very, very bad people on there. Not bad. They're people, just not very skilled. So, you know, look for 5-star ratings, lots of them, before you hand over any money.
And back to the first thing, with like your idea with like an app and everything like that, and if you want to start off small before coming to someone like Red Tractors, finding someone once you've got all the evidence and things like that, what are the best tools to use in finding where to go?
I don't have a good answer for you there. It's been a while since I've been on the tools. But there are like drag and drop app makers, right? So they don't look, you know, you're not going to get Airbnb on day one, you know, beautiful user experience. But you might be able to enough to clunky but works.
Or personal tools to find where or who to go to.
Yeah, well, the way the startup sector works is Startup Victoria is worth joining, and if you go to some of their meetups and just get to know lots of other founders, they'll have been exactly where you are, trying to figure it out as well, and they will often have lots of referrals. There's probably even members of that community that can help you, but that's a nice place to get some, you know, like advice as well as contacts.
Any other questions in the room? Yeah, great.
Hi.
Hi.
Tristan, I just wanted to ask you, this is a bit of a random question, but at the beginning, when you said that there's a lot of opportunity in the music industry that you've kind of identified, is there any particular area or anything specific that you think could be disrupted, or anything you think is really missing?
Missing is a tough call, but the way that I see the industry is it's got different sectors to it. So when you think about the first one, which is how music is created, there is a whole bunch of new tools out there to help musicians create music. There's also AI platforms that are writing music for you, good or bad. So you know, in that area, there's a hell of a lot going on, which shows that, you know, there's a demand for different things. And then when you look at, you know, the royalty rights area of the market, you know, you've got companies like Jackster that have come along and realised that there's not anyone keeping a good enough track of all of this, and that affects everyone's income. And then you look at sort of distribution and, you know, the innovation that's happening in streaming services like Music Health we just spoke about is taking music into the aged care sector. I mean, that's totally different to other companies that are streaming in other different ways. So there's a whole lot of change there. And then when you look at sort of how artists' work is marketed, you know, the video clip was brilliant. That's all you needed. Now, you know, you need to have a whole suite of experiences and tools and NFTs and you know, you need to be able to be on every, you know, platform, and you know, you really need to hunt for where your heartland audience is. So, you know, there's a whole lot going on there. And then you've got the blockchain, which is just changing everything in incremental ways, but it's going to be fundamental. So, you know, the other thing I think, you know, coming into the music industry is that startups have always been the movers and shakers in this industry. A lot of the innovation and the way that we appreciate and see and experience music has come through startups breaking the existing way of doing things. And I don't think there's anything, everything is saying that's going to continue.
We're going to jump to an online question. So Lisa, hi Lisa, would like to ask, would love advice on growing teams. How do you know when you're ready to do this? If I had more help, I could get more work. Oh, if I had more help, I could get more work, but I can't take on more work without more help. It's a
nice problem to have.
Sound like a riddle.
Yeah. Teams are hard work. Like, people are a giant pain in the ass most of the time. You know, and it's, I think you touched on the, you know, making sure everyone's aligned. I think alignment is really, really important when you're building those teams. And I guess it feels like that question has come from someone who's maybe running a services business, you know, where it's the income and the bums on seats are highly correlated. You know, the more people, as long as you've got enough work to do, you can get it done quicker with more people. You know, I think that's interesting, and obviously that's a tried and true method. In startup land, we try and focus on problems or solutions for problems that can disconnect the growth of the company from the amount of people you need. So, you know, your costs over time sort of flatten out, and your revenue sort of keeps going up and to the right. And the difference is kind of, you can take the difference and plow it back into the product and make it go even faster. So, you know, if you are in a services businesses, then there's a lot of people around the world in a lot of different countries who are way smarter than us and who have a very low cost of living, who would happily work for you if you can find some work for them to do. Finding the good ones is hard, and I know people that run, you know, will put the exact same piece of work out to 3 or 4 people, run them all in parallel and pick the best one at the end, knowing that they can do 4 bits of work of the same thing, still make money and get the best one of 4, and then sort of repeat that over and over again until they have a cohort of people that they're reliable and high quality and get the job done. So,
That's
you know,
very clever. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you're paying people for their time, like I really hate it when people make people do work without paying them. But you know, the delta between what you can charge someone in Melbourne versus what you can get someone's time from in the Philippines, for instance, is really high. So as long as you treat them fairly, then I think that's an interesting way to scale up the how do you do it. But you know, there's a lot of there's the reward's high, but the time risk is pretty high as well. You know, it's not easy to do that process I just described well.
I think it's a great activity too, to if you are in a services business, to get a couple of related colleagues over and actually sit there and think, well, how do we productize this? How do we make this something that we don't physically have to do? How can we make this into something that you click on and it downloads and then you can use that yourself and we don't need to be there to do it for you? Because that's the beginning of a really interesting company.
Thank you for generosity and what you're sharing. Anyway, on the note about services and wages generally, do you find that most startups or things that Tractor would fund more about products or things rather than people and, say, wages?
Yeah, especially for us. So Tractor believes that, recurring revenue is an asset. Therefore, if it's an asset that's growing because you've got a good product, then we're happy to basically pull forward some of that revenue and allow you to pay it back over time. We have lent to a few services companies that are transitioning into product companies. So they've managed to build a product, but it's growing as part of their overall revenue, and they'd like to. Usually what they want to do is fire a few pain in the ass customers, take all their time up and put those people on the product so it can grow a bit faster. Like that's a transition thing. And the reason we do that is because if it's a software product or a technology product, then again it's likely you're likely to understand how to make the thing grow, whether it be by advertising or pulling whatever levers you can possibly pull, where some extra revenue, extra paid ads or whatever can drive that growth. Where if you've got 4 people on your team and you need to get more work, to make more money, you need to hire a 5th person, you've got to go find them, so on and so forth. That's unlikely to sort of grow at the nice rate that we need it to grow at to work for us.
Especially if one of them leaves.
Yeah, and it's tough out there. You've probably all heard lately, the last month or so, that valuations of tech companies have all gone through the floor. Our favourites of Netflix and Apple and Microsoft are all far, far cheaper than they were the other day. The upside of that means that the talent market is probably not as frothy as it was, and people just having people come and go from your team because everyone's throwing money at them is the other side of that same coin. So hopefully if you find some people and look after them, they'll stick around rather than just getting money thrown at them from Facebook and going there. Funding services companies is inherently hard. However, you should be able to make money from day one. So like every person on your team should be, their time should be sold at 2 or 3 times what you pay them. Because the way I used to run my service company was like thirds. It's like a third of it goes to their salary, a third of it goes to run the business, and a third of it sort of comes into profit of the business. And you can choose that last third, what you do with it, whether it's spend it back in the business to make it go faster. But you definitely shouldn't be, selling their time for the same thing that you buy it off them for. That's bad business.
Last question.
Got another one from Stephen.
Sorry, it's mostly for my entertainment, but what's the most random someone has come to you and said, will you fund this, whether you funded it or not, idea?
I have a hilarious one. So we're a new lender. We're 18 months old, and we sort of came out with a fairly significant, Australian Financial Review article. Here we are. And then, so I've started speaking to more and more lenders in the space, and they're like, welcome to the game. And I'm like, what do you mean? So this guy's like, I'd love to borrow some money. I do like liquor importing. And I'm like, okay, that probably can't do that, but sure, tell me more. So liquor importing, I'm like, all right, fine, I'll put it to my team. I don't really make the decision. The team makes all the decision. And our analyst was analysing as he does, and he's like, I've done some research on this dude. Like, I'm sure he does sell champagne to clubs, but that's not all he does. And the other shit he does, we're not lending to. And I'm like, right. So that's what they meant when the other lenders said, welcome to the lending game. So like all these people who do this dodgy shit try and get you to lend them money. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, geez, you seem to make a lot of money out of champagne. He's like, yeah, it's really lucrative. I'm like, there's some numbers aren't adding up here. Yeah. So that's happened about 2 weeks in. Yeah. Yep. Here comes Katie.
Here comes Katie.
Taking the long road around the back.
Round of applause for Katie.
Thank you for filling the dead air. Well, I want to thank you so much again, Tristan and Matt, for joining us today and coming down to Music Market and connecting with the music community. I want to thank all of you in the room today. Please feel free to stick around and have a snack and a drink on us. Thanks to all the online audience. Mel is going to post a link in the chat with a brief survey. We'd love to get your feedback on the event, and we'll also circulate it to everyone who registered for a ticket afterwards as well. And we look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.